New Buddha Way Dhamma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
Today's topic is what I call the truth about truth. I'm quite fascinated with this topic of the truth, whether New Buddha Way or something called Buddhism is just giving us another account of the truth, the absolute truth, what is really the truth, and somehow trying to impose that on people. So this is a worry that we have in the West, given our history, where we don't really like to hear too much about the so-called absolute truth, and we certainly don't like anyone imposing the truth on us. On the whole, there are some people that are quite happy with that, actually. Given our history around totalitarianism, fascism, the Holocaust, etc., we're a little bit wary about anything that smells of the truth. Now, the difficulty with that is that we can overreact and close the door on anything that might actually not be the truth, but at least a truth, or it could be something that's useful or instructive, something to be considered, something perhaps provisional. Anyway, let's come back to this idea of the truth. There are two big contenders at the moment for the truth. One of them is a particular version of science. We hear people like Richard Dawkins and some others, including Hawking, for example, who give us the idea that science has already got the truth about human existence, or it soon will have. At least in principle, it can achieve complete truth, the theory of everything, they call it sometimes, the complete theory of everything. There are other scientists, more sensible, who say, well, not only haven't we got the complete truth from science, but in fact it's impossible for various reasons for us to have the complete truth. Various arguments are given. For example, we can never know what is at the limits of the universe. That's not because we haven't got the instruments, but because we can only have an idea of the universe via the speed of light. The speed of light is limited. Then there's some other very good arguments, which I won't bore you with, to show that science is incompletable. That is, it's not that it's incomplete or we haven't got the right instruments, but logically you can't ever complete it. But that's not what scientists or the more dogmatic ones like to say. They like to say, science is which will tell us the complete truth about everything. Right. That to me is a form of fundamentalism. It's scientific fundamentalism. The other contender for the truth is religion. Now, I wouldn't want to tar all religion with the same brush, but these days there is a pretty strong and dogmatic version of most world religions, which also claim to provide us with the absolute truth or infallibility. And of course, when you have more than one contender for the absolute truth, they are going to be at loggerheads, because if there can only be one truth and you've got several different voices providing different versions, all of them claiming it is the truth, they're quite likely to fall out, because religion is something that's important to people, very important, it guides their lives, and then they're strongly attached to it, and it is the truth. And along comes somebody else who says, no, it isn't actually, I've got the truth. That's very unsettling. That creates insecurity. It creates fear. It creates contempt for the person who disagrees, and it leads to conflict. But I just want to warn you that I don't think this is true of all religions in all their different versions. And it very often is not true of the founder of a particular religion. But we live in an age of fundamentalisms. We tend to tie everything with the same brush. So these days you've got a big quarrel between scientific fundamentalists and religious fundamentalists. both of them misunderstanding each other actually. Where does Buddhism fit into all this? Is it just another fundamentalist voice telling us, no, you've got it all wrong, this is the truth? The answer to that, I think, is yes and no, because unfortunately there are out there fundamentalist versions of Buddhism as well. But these have little to do with the teachings of the Buddha, who was not trying to tell us the truth and was certainly not trying to impose it on anyone, and he did not regard himself as the truth or the way, the only way, exclusive way to the truth. He wasn't playing that sort of game at all. If we look at, say, let's go back to science and how science is supposed to achieve the truth or get to the truth. It is said there is something called the scientific method, although if we look a bit closer and there isn't really much of a method. But anyway, if it is claimed, to take an example which quite intrigues me, that where do swallows and swifts go in the winter? And it was proposed quite seriously by quite learned people that they dive into ponds and then hibernate at the bottom of the pond in the mud. And if it is frozen over, they're okay, but in the spring they pop up, fly out of the pond, and there they are again. And this was the general view held about where swallows go in the winter. So nobody could find a swallow at the bottom of the pond, but most people weren't even looking. Those who were claiming that they were at the bottom of a pond hibernating never looked. See, the scientific method, if there is a method, is, well, look, first of all, observe, experiment. So when people started looking and following swallows, they realized that they all go off to a warmer climate, usually Africa, and as far as South Africa, which is quite astounding, actually. And when this was first proposed, those who said that they hibernate at the bottom of a pond said that is absolutely preposterous. How could this little bird fly all the way to South Africa? This is the most ridiculous theory I've ever heard. They definitely sleep at the bottom of a pond. But you see, science decided the truth about this. And that is, nowadays we can put little rings on the swallows, and we can actually tag them and follow them even by means of electronically. The same with cuckoos and other creatures. Just an example. So the point is that the truth about swallows and where they are in their winter is settled by means of observation, by actually looking. Now, where does the Buddha stand in relation to that? Well, quite close in a way, because he also says, look, find out. Don't believe it just because, a guru says so, or even because I say so. Don't believe it just because the scripture says so. Have a look. But the difference between the Buddha's method, if he had a method, and scientific method, is that the place to look is nowhere outside. It's inside. If that makes any sense, it's into your own mind, into your own states of mind, into the phenomena of your own existence. That is your own direct experience. So the Buddha doesn't carry out scientific experiments, obviously. He doesn't measure things, he doesn't have experiments, he doesn't try to make predictions, he doesn't try to explain things from causes. He doesn't do any of that which is done in science. He says, sit down cross-legged under a tree or under a rock, close your eyes and try to let go of thoughts, feelings, and see what arises and watch it very, very carefully. And you will discover certain things for yourself, about yourself. Now, do you see how, in a way, that's a little bit like science, because it's saying, don't think, look. Don't guess. The difference is that it's inward looking in his case. Now, how does this compare with fundamentalist religions? Well, they're not really telling us to look for yourself. On the whole, and I stress I'm talking about the fundamentalist versions, they are saying, believe. have faith. It's in the scripture. Don't doubt, but have faith in someone or something. When within those same religions, deeply spiritual people, including actually the founders, say, well, actually, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, look and see. It's already here in front of you. You just need to look in the right way. They were ignored, in some cases persecuted, and in some cases executed. So within religion itself, there's a diversion. There's a splitting between those with the fundamentalists, where the majority view that it's a matter of belief and faith, and those who say, well, actually, it's not. It's about quietness and looking into yourself to understand things. So we can't tar the whole of religion with the same brush. We have to be a bit careful here, because we can learn things from many other traditions. You see, there's a danger. If we condemn all religion, we're in the danger of putting ourselves in the same position as the fundamentalists, looking down on people or rejecting, dismissing, without actually considering how they came to have these beliefs or what it was the founder was teaching. Because there are wonderful things you can learn from all religions, actually, but we are not in a very religious mood, some of us in the West, because we've associated religion with the fundamentalist version of it, and with dogma, and with all that follows from that, including a lot of brutality and violence. So we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, unfortunately. There is perhaps one little hitch here. You might say, hasn't the Buddha got something called the Four Noble Truths? So what are they then? Aren't they truths? Are they the truths? Well, is this a declaration of belief? Is it saying, here are our fundamental beliefs and you should believe them? But you listen carefully, because it's not actually doing that. It's sometimes the way it is presented by certain groups or movements, it does appear to be that way. But actually, it's based on looking. So, if you take the first noble truth, is this meant to be the truth, that is the belief which you ought to have and which I'm here to impose on you? Well, think about it. It says that, we human beings are always dissatisfied, we're bewildered, we're in conflict with each other and with nature. And the Buddha is saying, well, isn't that a fact? That from his own serious searching over 6 years, this is what he found to be an important fact. But at the same time, he's not saying you must believe it. He's saying, well, have a look and see, especially in the your more mature years, perhaps you need a bit of experience of life, and see whether that is the case. And if you don't think that is the case, that is fine. Go on searching. So if you don't think that swallows fly off to South Africa, well, look more closely. Also have a look at the bottom of a pond if you like, see whether they're there. And you might come to agree with me what are the facts, or if you persist, well, that's fine. We're not going to quarrel with you about it, because it's about the perception of facts, right? So there's nothing to impose on anyone. The second noble truth is that if that is a fact, then what is the cause of it? Surely it must depend on something. There must be some condition by which this dissatisfaction and conflict comes into being. Like everything else that we see around us depends on certain conditions. See, even the scientists would say that, but they're talking about external conditions. The Buddha's talking about internal conditions. What internal conditions in us as human beings would lead us into this perennial dissatisfaction? Well, the Buddha looked. For 6 years he looked, very seriously. He wasn't doing anything else. and came to the conclusion it's because we actually just misunderstand our reality. We think somehow there's a kind of a self, a soul or a spirit or something trapped inside this body, and that the world is out there for me to manipulate or to gain something from. So we are craving to have more power over the world, to get more of it. He says, what he's learned is that this can't be right. It can't be right. There's something misconceived here. So he says, craving and rejecting in this fundamental way is what is behind the dissatisfaction and the conflict and so on. So that's the second noble truth. Then the third noble truth is that, well, if that is the case, eradicate the cause and you eradicate the effect. Or subdue the cause and you subdue the effect. So if we can subdue the craving, we're going to subdue the dissatisfaction. Okay? And the Buddha provides us with a whole panoply of ways of trying to undermine that condition, the condition on which the dissatisfaction arises. So the third noble truth is, yes, we can understand that condition and we can move beyond that. And then the fourth noble truth and this is the way to do it. So then he's got this whole range of meditative techniques as well as living one's life in a different spirit, in a different way, with different values, which will undermine that attachment to a view of things which splits the world into two, me, I, mine, and everything else, and which is the cause of the dissatisfaction, the bewilderment, and the conflict. Now again, the Buddha is not saying you have to believe this. In fact, he says quite clearly, I'm not asking you to believe it, I'm asking you to have a look and see whether what I'm saying is true. Don't have a look at me, have a look at you. Have a look inside yourself and see whether this is true. I don't think that we can say that the Buddha is any kind of fundamentalist or dogmatist. The simplest way to put this is across. It's a set of instructions. That's what the Buddha has got for us. And he's only saying, try these instructions because that's all I've got to offer. If you don't want to try the instructions, then there is nothing I've got to offer you because I haven't got any beliefs for you to attach to. I've got a set of instructions. Try this and see whether it works for you. To me, that is eminently sensible. Because with that approach to things, what need is there for quarrels, for wars, for violence, for abuse, and all the rest of it? Just try this and see whether it does bring the peace by getting at the very basis of it, which is our misunderstanding of our reality. The Buddha's not a scientist, and he's certainly not a fundamentalist scientist, but he does say look, but it's look inward. He's not a religious person in the bad sense, in that he's telling us just a belief is enough or faith is enough, but he is a religious person in the sense that he is pointing us at the most important things about our lives, the things which make sense of our lives, make sense of our birth, our death, all the things that are really important to us, our disappointments, our hopes, they all start falling into place from this perspective. So if a religion is something which addresses holistically those concerns, then you have to say, well, Buddhism is a religion. But if by religion we mean that something is founded on a particular belief, or indeed any belief, then Buddhism is not a religion. So take your pick. But do remember that in some of these other things called religions, there are people who know this very well. It's just that we are dominated now by a very fundamentalist picture of religion as we are by a very fundamentalist picture of science. I don't see any other way of confronting, my condition as an individual, but also just, which is the human condition, because we're talking about things that are common to all human beings. We're not talking about my particular concerns in life, because the concerns that we're talking about here are concerns of everybody. Loss, grief, death, but also joy, sharing, generosity, gratitude, all of those things. So, the truth about truth. What is the truth about truth?
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.